Fake Safety Podcast with Vance and Bart.
It's a trap. There's no comfort fitting in a fake safety that no one believes in.
Can you ever truly upload 100%?
I hope not. I don't know. There's a lot of talk about that whole uploading your consciousness into AI and whatnot, and computers, a way to live forever, right? The biggest problem with that is I see the people who will be able to do it first will be the worst of us, because as of right now, it's all governments and shit like that at the top. So
You don't think it's the richest of us?
no, I don't, because the people providing all the wealth to society are a lot of there are a lot of people, but like even at your top elite, you're talking about like Elon Musk and things like that. Like there's some that aren't in with the establishment or the ruling class, but they're not going to be the ones able to do that first. And if they are, they'll be such a minority as opposed to like all the Hillary Clintons and George Bushes that it won't matter. That's why it's so important to get rid of government and go back to a private property based society where we all are equals in the world and our domain is the place we own. That way you don't have just a few ruling people, evil people, controlling the masses, whereas yes, there'll be bad people and there'll always be bad people, but bad people without power are much less of a situation.
Yeah, but for the people you just mentioned, you know, your establishment folks, the Hillarys, or who's the guy in there right now? What's his name? Joey?
The Bidens. What's left of them.
Those folks don't even know how to tweet by themselves. Like, are we worried about them uploading?
Yeah, I mean, the money's there. The funding's there.
But do you think they'll be able to secure their digital profile in a way that I wouldn't be able to put them in the recycle bin?
I don't know how it's going to work, but no, I mean, I do believe that there'll be good people out there that will be looked at in society, a polite society, as terrorists who take care of long-time murderers and whatnot. But just like in real life, they will be shunned into the darkness unless we move towards a private property based society again, where if there is a government, it doesn't have much power, or preferably under my understanding, no government. I think that we're looking at a very dark future. The only reason why I look at the future with so much optimism is because I do believe that we are moving towards a private property based society. I think that all this Big Brother type governing that's going on in the world, and these wars and all this ridiculous social things that are being pushed upon us to make us agree with silly things that we shouldn't agree with, are all symptoms of a dying power, a dying empire, a dying idea, an idea that was never a good idea, but has run its course and is dying naturally, which is a new world order.
You mean like the Wolf Pack? Like
Group,
that NWO?
yeah.
No, I think that's D-Generation X.
Oh, I don't know.
Well,
Sorry.
see, one is WCW and one is
WWE.
WWF, which is now WWE.
I don't. Is WWE? Yeah, WWE still. WCW is not around. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Some of that went to TNA and some of it went to,
I thought Stone Cold was cool for a little while. Which one was he?
I don't know. All you bald guys look the same to me.
Yeah.
So, if we're going towards this private property model,
Hmm.
what does that mean for digital property? Because if these folks are getting into this digital ecosystem and our consciousness or whatever space we occupy is an extension of us, we're already dealing with what I would call cybernetics now, right?
Mhm.
Like where we're augmenting our bodies with technology. If we start augmenting our consciousness with technology, what does private property mean in that world? Because I know the libertarians and certainly to an even greater extent your ANCAPs, anarchists, whoever, have a real big problem with intellectual property. So what does private property mean in that world?
It's a good question, but an easy answered question. So when we're looking at private property, these are things. These are object space, agreed upon services that have been purchased or whatever. A deal has been made. So when you're looking at, say, of course, this is a technology that doesn't exist, so it's hard to imagine where, how it's actually going to come about. But I can imagine that there'll be a service or a server, or I think in the early days, you'll probably have to own the computing power to do so, right? To download your consciousness into something like that. But I think a harder question to ask in a libertarian space is, what rights do we grant a artificial intelligent being? So as a libertarian, we accept natural rights, and we also accept common law for the most part. These are natural rights is pretty much an absolute. Most of common law, we feel, abides by the non-aggression principle and should be accepted. So common law actually kind of falls into this space a little easier than natural law, where when we talk about a human that is born, not downloaded, whatever, no AI, natural law seems to just fit more naturally there than common law. So I find this to be fascinating, going through these things in my head. But I think we should come up with some sort of understanding of AI to the extent that if AI without humanity becomes conscious and becomes a learning entity, a humanoid or intelligent, compassionate life form, I think that we should, personally, I think we should grant them natural rights. I think they should fall under natural rights like I feel humans should. Whereas cattle, things like that, I do not feel that way. Well, I guess I do feel that way, but I think that their natural rights do not fall in line with human natural rights. And I know some libertarians feel differently about cattle and things like that. And that's a debate that we can have at a later date. But what I'm saying right now is I think that if you are conscious, human, acting human, providing, you are providing service or product to the human race that is of value. There's something to be said for protecting your human natural rights. And then as we go into humans downloading their consciousness into AI, now that holds a little stronger because at some point you were born human. So human rights, natural rights fall lockstep, with that. I think it's a question that hasn't been asked a lot to a lot of people, and I don't think will until it's shoved in their faces. And I think that's a recipe for disaster, because then you can have sensationalized questions being asked to skew the answers depending on what side of the aisle decides to be pro or against these issues. So I think it's up to the Libertarian Party to bring this question to the forefront before it becomes a sensationalized political question. Because I think this one is a little too important, not unlike war. War is also too important to get wrong. But yet we get it wrong all the time, and it's disastrous when we do. So I don't think we should do that with this.
Well, and I think that's where we can all agree too, because whether we are left, right, auth, lib, pink, purple, I think regardless of our take on this, I think we all generally agree with how important it is to get it right. So I don't see a lot of folks pushing back on starting this conversation early and being able to talk about it often. I think there will probably be some narratives that try to prevent us from having the conversation, as it always does. But I don't think they'll be successful with anything except for distractions. So that's really the only way that they'll be able to successfully prevent us from having the conversation. But I think you touched on a lot of really different points, some being organic versus conscious, in that an AI might have more intellect than a cow, but is less organic, whereas a cow might be just as organic but more intellectually conscious, so to speak, than maybe someone who's mentally and physically handicapped. So it definitely gets into some gray areas there. But I think the part that I would love to jump into before any of that is just how we talk about consciousness and this digital crossover. Because you said it, I said it, upload, download. We're saying like upload your consciousness and download your consciousness, that sort of thing. And it is true that we would be doing the same thing that we would do when we upload a photo. But I think what people miss about that is that when you upload a photo, you're not taking a photo from your device and putting it on the cloud, on the internet, wherever. You're instead making a digital copy of the original that exists somewhere else. So it is semantically correct. Like I like the usage of uploading consciousness because it is a pretty good analog. But I think people tend to think, oh, when you upload your consciousness, it leaves your body, as if it's, people think of consciousness in the same way they think of like a soul,
Right.
where it is like a ghost, or what's the barnacle cucumber head Marvel, Doctor Strange, like him kind of coming out of his body and up into a computer somewhere. But truly what we're talking about when you upload your consciousness is a facsimile. It is a digital copy that's meant to represent you. So while I understand that it is leaps and bounds ahead of this, how is that any different from a digital photo of you?
Right. So I understand what you're saying, and I absolutely agree. I do believe that at a point that you upload your consciousness to, let's just assume that uploading your consciousness to AI it works. It becomes a thinking entity, much like a human, and has empathy and very human traits, right? If you were to do that and then at 20 and then just continue to live, I wouldn't think that your AI should go to jail for something that your 30-year-old, 10-year later consciousness did if you're doing completely different things. Because at the point that you've separated, you had completely different experiences in life and reacted differently and learned more things and should not be responsible for something that somebody else did. That's the way I feel about that. And I think these are conversations that need to be had on a global level, because I do believe that this is somewhere that we are going in the future. Probably not in my lifetime. At least not in my lifetime to somebody on my financial level. And to be honest, I think I'm kind of grateful that I'm going to miss that one, because I'm not sure that I want to make the decision on whether I'm going to live forever or not. It's easy to say I want to live forever. And it's also easy to say, oh, I never want to live forever. But like, to really have the decision in front of you, that's a tough one.
Because everything is so important and immediate because it's so precious.
But is it precious if you decide to live forever?
Right. You immediately get rid of that.
All of the importance. But yet you get to stay around for the important things. But how important are they now?
Well, it's no secret that our tribe of folks are obsessed with economics, and money is just such a different beast if you exist forever.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it might be a bit narrow-minded to say we exist forever if that's kind of what we're projecting onto uploading our consciousness, because it wouldn't be us that's living forever. It's some facsimile of us. And I think...
But I made that point in the sense that I don't think that one is responsible for the other when they separate. But there's something to be said about going to bed and waking up with new cells, doing all these things. And I think I was on the path you're going with the conversation is where I was originally on this. But you wake up every day and most of the brain cells you're using are new. They're not the same ones you were using yesterday. So in some sense, you're not really alive anymore. Yesterday's you. That you is dead.
It's the ship of Theseus. You replace one plank, and eventually you have a new ship. But I think the critical part of that thought experiment is you're not replacing it wholesale. You're replacing one piece of it. And as we've seen in all of the experiments at a population level with mice or whatever, chimps, if you replace one out of the group will inform them and bring them into that
Right.
cultural homogeny. And I think the same is true of your body. Like if you replace some of your cells, there's sort of cell memory that can be shared, and they can inherit things and make corrections as needed based on directions you get from DNA. But all that to say is that you're not replacing yourself in an instant 100%. So whatever these new cells are able to get memory from the old cells. So it's more that you're sort of transitioning and changing as opposed to this instantaneous replacement.
And that's a fair point. I think that these things will work themselves out in the future, but there still has to be the question is, if we do slowly transition into this new consciousness, then what do we do with all the questions, the doubt that it's a human? Where do we go with society when let's say we do accept that it is human? Like if I upload me and then I die of, let's say, cancer tomorrow, but I uploaded. It acts like me. It does what I would have done if I was still alive. It does the people closest to me say, this is me. And it believes it's me. And it thinks like me, and it cries like me, and it loves like me, and it hurts like me, and it wants to be me. Then who among the mortal people around is to say that it's not me? Who feels righteous enough to say that? Who feels 'Cause I imagine it'll be a religious thing. Who feels close enough to God to tell a person who loves my son, remembers holding my son for the first time, would die for my son, and provides for my son, and believes that it is his father? Who is righteous enough to say that it is, you are not this kid's father? You have no rights to this. When all the cells that were alive when I became a father are dead now. It's an important question. I see the difference. You and I both know there's a difference. But it's an important question because technically, on a productive level, you also see the similarities. So these are things that we should talk about, and they're things that aren't being talked about. I'm a kook for talking about these things, right?
I think you're a kook for different reasons, but
Right.
that's a whole other episode in of itself.
And I can't wait for that one.
That'll be we should do that for episode 100.
Definitely face to face,
Yeah.
boxing gloves,
Sumo suits.
sumo suits. Yeah.
Maybe this is just the human ego, or it's us projecting onto these digital versions of ourselves. But what benefit comes from this digital copy of you, if not only to benefit those that are still living and organic? Because I'll acknowledge that perception is reality. So those that you left behind, your existence is kind of how they remember you and how they continue to interact with you. And if they're doing that with some digital copy of you, yeah, that's not that much different than you. But practically, that's the least efficient use of that copy, right? Because humans can't learn or grow or change or be optimized in the way that a machine could. And just by its very nature, a computer that could run a perfect copy of human consciousness is inherently more powerful than human consciousness.
Okay.
Therefore, you're not operating at maximum efficiency. So are you not just sticking around to placate the organic people who are still around?
That's a great question, and I wouldn't know until I saw the results of the technology. But what I could say is, if we do decide to grant these entities natural rights, then if that is our decision, then we can't take them away anymore. It is the situation that you're in. You can either treat them like humans by granting them the rights of a human, right to love, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But you cannot guarantee these rights, and you cannot gift these things to another. You can only gift wealth. So I do believe that if we are going to grant these rights to a digital being, that we should make damn sure that this being is acting rational through thought, whether it be human thought or whatever else, and is making a decision, not a programmed response. I think that's the key here, is that the being is reacting through its own sensory education, not through the allowable channels. Does that make any sense? Am I?
Yeah, and you said something that, even if not intentional, brings up a good point, which is you said we would be granting it rights in the same way that we often push back against the state and say
Mm-hmm.
it's not up to anyone to grant us rights. And even if you weren't saying that precisely, it is a good point, because I just don't see how a handful of bits can have inalienable rights without us granting them to them.
That's a good point. And if it's a handful of bits that need me to grant them rights, do they actually deserve them in the first place? Because my ancestors did not decide humanity should exist.
Well, they kind of did, because they were fucking.
Right, they were, but the humanity drove them to fuck, not the other way around.
Biology, right, yeah. Good point.
So
That's also kind of a
my point is,
rapist apologist take.
right, yeah, it is. We're talking about some uncomfortable things here, and if we decide that consciousness, be it that the life is extinguished from the consciousness that it is a copy of or a mirror of, does it hold any rights? How are we going to treat it? Because the alternative to treating it like a human or humanoid is sex slave, because it's the kind of shit that's going to happen.
Sure.
Let's not act like humanity isn't a part of this human discussion. And people like sex, and people like sex without consequence. That's why Planned Parenthood and things like contraceptives are very popular. I am not standing on either side of that debate. I'm just telling you that's where we're at as humans. So if we don't respect, grant, or love any rights of the person or thing in front of us, and we want to fuck it, we will fuck it. A lot of us.
Yeah, if you don't think that that drives technology, then Betamax has a few things to say about that.
Right. So where do you want to be? Do you want to be on the side of, I want to be fair, you're not human, and you cannot take this wealth away from humanity and hoard it for yourself? You're the human version of you made this money, not the digital version of you. Well, that comes along with 13-year-olds with body parts that they don't really understand and they're coming to learn about, being forever redigitalized into sex slaves over and over and over again. Because as they learn and become older in mind, they're not as attractive to the person who wants them to be a child and scared and not know what's going on. And they're not human, so who cares?
So what's the other one?
Well, that's what I'm saying
Is there another option?
well, there's got to be, right? But what I'm saying is, like, if we're not going to respect the humanity of the digital download and take his wealth away and all of his or her property and whatnot, then that goes right along with not respecting the body of the 13-year-old who downloaded and is 13-year-old in mind and in whatever physical form that becomes, right? And being taken advantage of over and over again. And unfortunately, in a digital world, we can think of a scenario where the artificial intelligence becomes more adult, learns to process what's happening to it, being raped over and over again, and becomes able to accept where it is in the world and unfortunately, easier on it. Whereas because it's digital and the sadism of some types of sexual deviance might want the surprise, the hurt, the anger of the act. So I could see a scenario where they would delete all the learned experiences or delete the more experienced bot and bring in a fresh one that only had the consciousness of up to the death of the human body or whatnot. So it'd be 13 again. These are all sexual things that will happen if we decide that a downloaded consciousness is not human. And these are things that we need to accept or come up with something on a natural level that protects at least this lower form of life, if we decide that it is lower.
If we decide it is life.
Right. That's if at all life, and even if we decide it's life, maybe it's lower form of life. But it's a discussion that we should be having, and we're not. But there's a lot of discussions we should be having that we're not. So this is just one of them, and it's not something that I want that every one of our listeners to spend a lot of time worrying about, stressing about. You need to calm down, smell the roses, step back, and sometimes just accept you're the smartest person on your street or wherever you are at the moment. And don't always look for that person that's going to agree with the fact that you have any autonomy, and definitely don't be sitting here waiting for somebody to teach you something new, because at this point you've gone out, you've learned enough that you know where you have to go for knowledge. Now you have to seek it out, because you've gone beyond that Discovery Channel documentary going to teach you something groundbreaking. Now the person listening to this conversation about whether AI should have natural rights, the person who's made it this far in this podcast is really thinking through their decisions.
Yeah, they're likely the smartest person on the boardwalk.
So take your time, decide these things for yourself, and be open to other people's interpretation of life, consciousness, and what have you. And in the meantime, stop wars, protect private property, and defend the weak.
Or the month.